like someone that could help us out. Having a bit of trouble with another merchant in town who goes by the name Thorinir.
You may recognize that statue over there on the table. The very one that you recently sold for less than its true worth.
With the Emperor dead and no new heir crowned, the dragonfires in the temple will be dark, for the first time in centuries. It may be that the dragonfires protected us from a threat that only the Emperor was aware of.
You win this round, Howard. Graphical fidelity is rapidly reaching the point where it is no longer impressive to have good graphics. I would argue it's been at that point for nearly a decade by now. Like, we've been having polygons, y'all. We've been having nice 2K or 4K textures and whatnot. Nowadays, the advancements in how good a game looks are going to come in the form of advancements in character animation technology, cinematography, and that most important bitch of all, art direction. Because this would still be the prettiest view in video games if it had half the polygons, and 10 years of graphical advancement still didn't stop the facial animations in Fallout 4 from somehow looking worse than they do in Oblivion. So when I compare the differences between Oblivion and its recent remaster courtesy of Virtuos, I'm not going to do so from a perspective of, ooh, sparkly. Oblivion was already sparkly. Rather, I intend to ask a few questions of the game unrelated to its new texture file size. Question 1. Does its art direction work to bring it in line with the art style established by Skyrim and Elder Scrolls Online, while still maintaining the elements that allow original Oblivion to still be beautiful in 2025? Question 2. Do the updates to animation make the gameplay more comfortable to use? Can I run somewhere without feeling like I'm awkwardly gliding around? Does combat feel more reactive and less like two people waving pool noodles at each other? Does magic feel truly magical?
That's more than one question.
Shut up. Question 3. Does Sheogorath still serve? Now, I've got my fair share of Elder Scrolls characters I've conceptualized over the years, but I'm of the opinion that the best way to get a feel for a fantasy RPG's combat system is to test out the parts of it that are separate from the press X to hit weapon, i.e. magic and skill systems. So I decided to pull out an old OC for my job, Round, a Bosmer healer. And it's definitely Round, with an N, something I definitely remembered. I totally didn't misspell his name when recreating him in a remaster, shut up. Round serves two purposes. One, he will test how rigorous the character creation is. I've always imagined Round as like a hot, middle-aged kind of guy, but like a scrungly kind of hot that comes from being an Amira worshiper who doesn't really practice self-care. The kind of guy that Tumblr would go nuts over, you know? Unfortunately, that's not a vibe I can really capture with OG Oblivion's character creator, no matter how good I usually am with these things. Ugh.
Look him and tell me there's a god!
Secondly, he will help me test out how different the combat systems are and what changes were made, because my dear sweet god, in the original Oblivion, Round is the most unoptimized motherfucker alive. Healer is a class that relies on willpower and personality skills. Bosmer men take a penalty to specifically willpower and personality. Healer is a magic class. Bosmer don't have many useful magical skill bonuses, so we're starting with pretty bare bones major skills. Restoration is a skill that requires a lot of magicka upkeep, which is why it got tied to the magicka upkeep attribute in the first place. Guess what, mother truckers? This boy's an Atronach, which means he has no magicka upkeep. Which I guess is a good thing for that low willpower, but it also means that the natural attribute boosts will get you willpower from primarily using willpower-based skills are completely fucking useless. Oh, and he's got alchemy as a major skill, which means that all the magicka potions he'll need to make up for his stunted magicka will end up skewing his levels hard. Look, I love Round. He's got a good heart and a fun backstory that ties into Namira being the patron gods of beggars and cast-offs living in squalor. He's a good lad. But in Oblivion specifically, he is terrible at everything. Now, before I get into my thoughts on the remaster, I want to create a brief TLDW to preempt those who might get like a third of the way through the nitpicking section before leaving a nasty comment about how stupid and unappreciative I am before I even get to the modifying qualifiers or the unabashed glazing. I am going to talk about the parts of this game that impressed me and the parts that did not, but let me make it clear. Those parts might have equal word counts because I'm a loquacious whore who's never had an opinion I didn't immediately interrogate to death, but they are not equal in weight. The things I love about this remake and the things that make me excited far outweigh the aspects that, at worst, are mostly unobtrusively unimpressive. It may sound like this, but it looks like this. So, if you want my review in a nutshell, this is it in an image. Cool, awesome. On to the fine-tooth combing. Oblivion started out swinging with its character creator with the introduction of backgrounds, modifiers to your chosen race that would alter your stat spread slightly. As someone who loves build customization, I'm always happy to see more ways to mix and match certain aspects. Being able to create a Bossmer who's a little tankier or a little friendlier allows for a broader array of variety in your starting options. Yes, this is just the gendered stat differences retooled, but I think that's the right call. As someone who treats gender as largely an aesthetic difference, both in my lived life and in my video games, I like not having to take it into account when build crafting, and I think retooling stats into backgrounds gives players, modders, and the devs the ability to expand on those options more than if they could if they kept the original system. I'd love to see a deeper variant of this background system in further games, with a broader array of options per race, and even some options that are universally available. I think it would provide more variety in both the build crafting and role-playing aspects of character creation. And more variety is always a good thing if you ask me. Though I still ended up choosing the same stat spread for Round that he had in the original. Can't do Namira's questline if his personality's too high after all, and the lower I can start it at, the less drunk I have to get to cross the sub 20 threshold down the line. The character creator itself is pretty solid too. I've seen some very pretty characters made in it, and I've seen some absolute atrocities made in it. Round ended up being pretty close to my vision of him in my head, though I did tweak his hairstyle a bit. Gotta work with what you have. Oh god damn it, there's that weird crunchy hair thing again. That shit was an avowed too. Is that just a UE5 thing I'm going to have to deal with? Ugh. Overall, the UI itself has a little more going for it this time around. There's a lot more clarity in certain aspects, and the fact that it tells you which buttons do what in the menu is extremely helpful. Raise your hand if you've ever had to Google how to drop things in the original game. They've also standardized the button inputs to be more in line with Skyrim, so those coming to Cyrodiil for the first time don't have to either realign their muscle memory to an entirely new system or go fiddling around in the input menus. That being said, the UI also has its fair share of problems. Bethesda games have historically had the two menu system. They've had the tab menu, which brings up character info, journals, maps, inventory, those kinds of tabs, and the start menu, which brings up the save, load, and settings features. These have gotten scrambled together into a single menu, which means there's a lot more sorting through menus and submenus just to get to being able to save your game, for instance. That's inconvenient and annoying, the two things a UI shouldn't be. Additionally, the inventory tabs in Oblivion were divided into their own distinct subheaders. The alchemy tab, for instance, kept the alchemical tools, potions, and ingredients all divided. So if you wanted one specific thing, you could scroll to whatever group that one thing would be in. Not so in the remake. Ingredients, tools, and potions are all scrambled in with each other, so if you want, say, your potions of magicka recovery because you're running Atronach and have to chug those like a 19-year-old opening assistant manager chugs Red Bull, you're gonna have to scroll through every single flower you've picked up along the way. That is, objectively speaking, a pretty shit change. Like, I'm not saying that to be mean. Making the inventory menu less organized is just the wrong choice to make, right? I also just don't care for the fact that item durability, weight, and cost all got scrambled up in the new UI. Like, that's not something that will matter to you if you're an entirely new player, but as a returning player from the OG, switching around how those were arranged it's just a real fixed what wasn't broken moment. There's also the fact that the local interior map is no longer a toggle. You have to zoom into max to get to it, and there's no way to zoom in and out to see the entirety of the local map once you're there, which is quite frankly a bit of a baffling decision. But it's not all bad. The compass UI includes distance beneath its markers, which I find is a useful tool when I've got 5 undiscovered things on my compass and I want to mark them one at a time without playing triangulation and parallax games to try and figure out which one's closer. It's a small detail, but it's a handy one. And hey, the UI is just one aspect of the game, and while it's arguably the most important by far, it's not the only aspect you'll be looking at. So, what's the vibes on the game's visuals as a whole? By now, you probably shouldn't be surprised to find out that initially I found the visuals to be the least impressive part of the whole affair. I mean, I've been talking about it, right? Polygon count doesn't excite me, art direction excites me. And frankly, the art direction of the initial stretch of the game was, well, unexciting. Now, to be clear, by unexciting I do not mean bad. It is objectively a technically impressive game with lots of fancy graphical details, yada yada dynamic shadows, yada yada ray tracing, yada. But to me, nothing about the Imperial City was any more interesting to look at than it was in the OG. I mean, these banners have wind physics now, and I thought that was neat, I guess. What I did take initial note of was the voice acting. They added a couple new actors to the pool, including some veterans to the series.
Bothiel from the Arcane University is looking for someone to chase the bandits from Camp Ailes. Probably trying to enhance her weird machine.
Oh, hi, Keith. Fancy hearing you in Cyrodiil. I will say it was definitely an addition to my experience to be constantly getting jump-scared by Jason Marsden when I'm expecting Craig Seckler, let me tell you. Of course, while the new voice acting was pretty good, the audio mixing was a little bit hit and miss. This is definitely something on the programming/game dev end and not the actor end, because there are definitely characters whose conversation dialogue sounds a lot better than whatever's happening here.
Heard any word about the other provinces?
I have heard that Nord warriors have traveled from Skyrim with orc mercenaries to assault the Redoran of Morrowind.
Over here!
More fighting for the Nords.
Yes, you!
This is sad
We need to
news.
talk.
Oh geez, they gave Glarthir a beard. That's distressing. But yeah, overall, the initial stretch of the game looked like yet another temperate fantasy forest made by someone who doesn't realize that no, actually, that absurd shade of bright green is more true to life than slapping a brown shader over everything. I'd seen that before like 1,000 times, it just wasn't that awe-inspiring to me. As for interiors, the shifts in building lighting based on the time of day is pretty cool, I will grant that, but the lighting systems in dungeons didn't really blow my mind. The emphasis on ambient light in dungeons made things seem more realistic, sure, but at the cost of a degree of visual clarity compared to the original. On the flip side, the exterior had a lot more clarity where it counted, namely in the alchemical ingredients department. Maybe it was just because of the mods I was using at the time, but trying to find steel blue entalomas in the Great Forest in the original game was a fucking nightmare. I was smack dab in the middle of Entaloma country and I was coming up empty. Fortunately for my mana bar, that was not the case in the remaster. As far as the character faces go, I like them well enough. Sure, the changes they made to face structure and a lot of them are pretty disorienting, hashtag not my Martin, but there's a lot more detail and subtlety in the faces that just generally make them more interesting to look at. And it's not like they're all yassified or anything. People are still kind of comfortingly potato-y. They're just more aesthetically interesting potatoes. This is a high-yield potato farm, so to speak. No, the problem I have with the faces lies in the animation systems. They've got a bad case of Starfield face. You know, with the high-fidelity, near-realistic facial features mixed with janky, stiff facial animations. Even the way they move their bodies is kinda Starfield-y. That's one of the biggest concerns I had with the idea of a realistic version of Oblivion prior to the game's release. Sure, the OG models were weird and cartoony, but that actually worked to the game's advantage in a way. The facial models being unrealistic and goofy meant that the goofy expression systems of the mid-aughts didn't look noticeably out of place. That's not the case here. The stiff expression-to-expression changes are jarring and plunge the game's facework into an uncanny valley that wasn't nearly as prevalent in the original. Again, say what you will about Veilguard, and I will someday, believe me. But rarely did I feel that the facial animations were from an entirely separate technical era than the faces they were animating. Mostly. Ballara's lip sync got weird sometimes. I mean, hell, if you want a recent same engine example, Avowed was also made in Unreal 5, and that game's character animation pool never felt especially visibly janky. Expressions wove from one to the other fairly fluidly, and the system did a good job of mixing facial and body reactions to make the character performances feel more reactive and in the moment. Not to beat a dead Brahmin, but once again, animation direction will define how good a game looks to a much greater degree than the number of polygons that are being animated. Overall, I was fully expecting to spend the rest of my gameplay experience being down on the actual aesthetic appeal of the game, compared to the vibrancy of its predecessor, and solidifying myself in the fandom as that witch who doesn't like graphical remasters. Then I arrived in Kvatch. The first thing to catch my eye were the embers raining down like glowing flakes of firelight. Then, as the sky grew red, I saw it. Flashes of bright orange lightning, something that the original had never had. And when I crested that hill and saw that gate to Oblivion spilling over with infernal light... Oh, I get it now. And it only got better when I stepped into the Deadlands. The burning oceans of lava were now cradled by distant hills and silhouettes of sunken ruin. The lands looked like they were created from igneous stone. And god motherfucking damn, that sigil well in the center of the Oblivion Tower? Go off, King. That was around the point where my feelings on the visuals began to turn around. Like, damn, forgive me, proper lighting systems, I was not familiar with your game. This is what encouraged me to actually start exploring the game down to its very depths, in the hopes that I would find more of that same feeling of danger and awe. That feeling like I had stepped into a world beyond my own. And I found that for everything that I found to be less than jaw-dropping, I found something that truly shined. The stonework on Ayleid ruins looked a bit duller and less like the ruins of a decadent Elvish empire, but the glasswork and the way it caught the light of the wells carried a captivating opalescence to it that stunned me. The Nibene Harlants might have lost some of their luster, but other parts significantly did not. If you had told me beforehand that I would have teleported to the Leyawiin Mages Guild and stepped outside, only to be immediately taken aback by the lush verdance of Leyawiin, a city my brain only remembers for its constant rain and taste the rainbow-ass houses, I would have pressed X to doubt on that one. Ironically, a lot of what I found beautiful only served to prove my point. Graphical fidelity and texture resolution are all nice and well, but they play second fiddle to atmosphere and presentation. It was the heightened experiences, the experiences that went above and beyond realistic texture detail, that really stuck out to me. Seeing the forests of Cyrodiil bathed in the scarlet glow of the Deadlands. Seeing a fort brazier lit with the white flames from a distance and going to check it out because, that's unusual. Climbing to the top of Frostcrag Spire, watching the sun crest over the Wizard's Tower, and casting a gaze across the snow-crested mountaintops, occasionally interrupted by a gate to hell, and then turning that same gaze down to the valley below? It just goes to show that the only thing more important than a first impression is the second. Also, if you want to create a really dope open fantasy world, you gotta put elevation in it. So, let me paint you a picture. I was in the Imperial Markets, right? Had just gotten out of the sewer, picked my class and major skills, and was inevitably getting some early levels in my passive skills. And as I was running around, I ended up leveling athletics, as one inevitably does in this game. And I noticed something. Did you see that? That was a minor skill contributing to character level gains. Oh, things have changed. So before I go into the changes to the leveling systems, as well as the changes to combat and gameplay overall, I want to answer one very pertinent question on everyone's minds. Is the fundamental core experience of Oblivion still there?
The feedback isn't fancy.
Have you seen the
It
latest
fills you
Black
up.
Horse Courage?
Sure do,
Quite a
Sergeant.
story, don't you think?
No one even knows who did
there.
it.
Once in a while.
I've heard others say the same.
Fuck, man, is it ever. A sensory overload of ambient dialogue? Check. Goof-ass physics bugs? Check. Leaving Martin in the next county over by accident because the man's got a top speed of geriatric bulldog while your Bosmer has the zoomies? Oh boy, check. So don't worry, this isn't a completely different game wearing the original IP like some sort of fucked up skin suit. But there are a lot of under-the-hood changes, and they're all changes in the way I kinda wanted things to be changed, and changes that actually make me pretty hopeful for how these kinds of systems will be handled in Elder Scrolls 6. First of all, the maligned attribute leveling system of Days Past has been completely reworked. Instead, you are provided 12 points per level up, which you can distribute into up to 3 attributes of your choosing. This method guarantees that you will never end up in a situation where you only get 6 points per level up, when the game's level scaling expects you to have at least 10 or more. And it guarantees that skills such as athletics and acrobatics don't completely jank up your build. It also allows you to pick and choose which attributes you want to raise per level up. So if you want to boost, say, strength for your carry weight as a mage, you don't have to go around spending endless money on trainers or whacking mudcrabs with weapons you'd never otherwise use. You're allowed to play your character exactly how you want all the time, and still get the boosts you want to the attributes you want at the end of the day. And because attribute gains are no longer determined by skill, skills are no longer grouped by attribute. Remember at the start of this video when I said that Round's primary skills would incline him towards willpower gains, but as an Atronach he wouldn't get the primary Magicka regen benefit of willpower in the first place, meaning that the primary skills he would use would only lead to wasted gains in the long run? Well, that's not a concern anymore. This is combined with a Skyrim-style leveling system in which all skills provide proportional progress to leveling up, with higher skills providing more experience than lower ones. The biggest difference between major and minor skills now comes in the fact that major skills naturally start higher, allowing for them to contribute more to leveling, especially in early games, and they level faster, meaning it's easier to reach their higher ranks and perks. This is, no joke, almost exactly the sort of leveling system I want from Elder Scrolls. If they had added a Skyrim-like skill perk tree system on top of it, it would have been my favorite Elder Scrolls system basically ever. I would have pivoted full stop to becoming a Bethestuber making build videos. But even beyond my particular brand of unhingedness, this is just generally a good change to how good the game feels to play. Oblivion can feel like it punishes you for not min-maxing every level you get, or even for leveling at all. There's a reason a lot of challenge runs for the game deliberately never go above level 2. The remake's changes to the leveling system fix a lot of that. reaching level 10 no longer feels like a death sentence to my character. And I could just have started and ended this review with that line and veteran Oblivion players would have already been sold, but there's still a lot more to enjoy. Listen, Bethesda makes me wordy, I don't know what to tell ya. Like, remember how I said that animation will define a game more than texture fidelity? Well, while I'm still not sold on the quote-unquote updates to the facial animations, the combat animations are a lot better. Different weapons have different movesets, enemies are more reactive to getting hit, and the sound design has been updated. Add to that a more readable, accessible health bar, and the combat feels a lot better even without the improvements to leveling. In OG Oblivion, I punched enemies to deal with the limitations of my ass build. In the remaster, I punch because punching is actually pretty fun. Oh, remaking my Mason Shield Boy is gonna be fun! And while I've been ragging on the graphical and texture overhauls like the contrarian I am, I can point to one major gameplay improvement derived solely from the textures alone. The traps. The lighting overhaul and more detailed textures means that spike trap plates no longer stand out like a glowing sore thumb. If you're not paying attention, and let's be real, if you're like me, you won't be, it's a lot easier to miss a plate until it's already moving, and that creates a stronger sense of danger that makes the atmosphere a little more tense when you realize that you could be face planting into spikes literally at any moment. Whether or not this is a good change, well, that depends on your tolerance for slapstick. And the updates and quality of life improvements don't stop there. You can now repair magical gear at apprentice level armorer instead of journeyman, making early game magical armor much more viable. Alchemical ingredients glow when hovered over, so you know the difference between them and the set dressing flowers, and collecting them no longer has a chance of failure. The Speechcraft wheel makes up for the facial animations by giving you color-coded cues on which options are the best after your first go-around with it. You can move while over-encumbered. I repeat, you can move while over-encumbered, this is not a drill. And there's a bunch of other minor details such as that. It's just a lot more accessible and player-friendly than the original Oblivion, without losing anything that made it what it was. If I do have one gameplay complaint, it's the game forcing you into third person while on horseback. I'm just not a fan. I literally only ever use horses when bringing Martin to Cloud Ruler, so it's not even within the same galaxy as a deal breaker or anything, it's just a quibble. An annoyance. I refuse to be anything but thorough in detailing my thoughts on anything, you should know this by now. Overall, if this is in any way indicative of the direction Bethesda is looking at taking for Elder Scrolls 6, then I am genuinely intrigued and excited. There are a lot of fiddly little details here that elevate this remaster not just above Oblivion, but above most of Elder Scrolls, and I want to see these carry over into future installments. And after my last hype train crashed and burned, it's really nice to feel optimistic for the quality of a game world I love again. But before we wrap things up here, we still have that one last question to answer.
Unworthy, unworthy, unworthy! Useless mortal meat, walking bag of dung!
I am Haskell, Chamberlain to the Lord Sheogorath. You approach the Shivering Isles. Through the door behind me lies the realm of Sheogorath, Prince of Madness, Lord of the Never There.
They say the gatekeeper's magical. I don't believe in magic, but I do believe in bones. Ha-ha!
Always a pleasure.
A new arrival! A shame about my gatekeeper.
Nope, the original version's hotter. Sorry, Virtuos. Wow, I sound just fucking awful in these wine reads. I did not realize how sick I was when I was recording for this. Ooh, springtime and allergies and weather, oh my. But yeah, long story short, Oblivion, real fun, it's actually got me kinda real hyped for Elder Scrolls 6 again. I didn't think we could do that. As usual, I've got some things in the pipe, and we'll see whether those things make it out of the pipe or don't, but, you know, I wanted to get this done and sorted, and learn a few more video editing tricks along the way while I was at it. In the meantime, I say in the meantime like I'm going somewhere with that, there is no in the meantime. There is only these credits. Bye.